Sorry for the fact there's been no videos out in a while. We actually discussed why there's been a couple of week break in our schedule in an article on our Patreon page. There's a link to that in the description. You don't need to be a paying patron to check it out, but if you are, then you can also contribute to a conversation thread about upcoming video topics. Both can be found over at patreon.com/TLDR news. So on Thursday, the UK held some local elections, and if you haven't already seen, they've caused quite a stir. Not all areas of the UK voted. For example, there were no votes in London, Scotland or Wales. Something former Mayor of London and current resident of London, Boris Johnson, didn't seem aware of when proudly tweeting that he'd voted in the local elections. Anyway, the point is that not all regions were voting, but everyone who did vote was electing local government officials, like members of local councils or even city mayors. This means that people weren't voting for a new government or new members of parliament, they were voting for more local level positions. This doesn't mean that these elections don't matter. Firstly, local elections are very important for towns, cities and regions, fundamentally affecting how they're governed. Secondly, they can be a litmus test for how the electorate feel about the current government and the state of politics. Because of this, it's always expected that the governing party will lose in local elections, with people choosing to protest their current policies and approaches. The shocking thing about this time is how much they've lost by, and how much the opposition party has lost by. Results are still coming in when this video is being written and recorded, but the general trends are already pretty clear. We'll be putting out a more in-depth analysis of the results soon, but for now, let's look at what we know so far, what it shows us, and how this will impact the government and Brexit going forward. Both the Conservatives and Labour have lost councillors since the last local elections. At the time of writing, the Conservatives have lost 523 councillors, and Labour has lost 77. UKIP has also lost councillors, with the big winners being the Liberal Democrats and Independents, with the Green Party also gaining a significant number of councillors. This has been an especially big win for the Liberal Democrats, who've had a rocky few years since their coalition with the Conservative Party. The coalition was unpopular with many Lib Dem supporters, and resulted in them being wiped out electorally by the Conservatives in the 2015 general election. Given how badly they did back then, the Lib Dems were expecting to regain some seats, but they've made something of a resurgence in these local elections, doing even better than expected. They have, at the time of writing, 343 more councillors than last time, an absolutely massive increase. We'll dive into what this means for Brexit and why people voted Lib Dem in a moment, but let's take a look at Change UK first. One of the big implications of the Lib Dem surge has been for Change UK, formerly the Independent Group. This party was founded just a few weeks ago, on a pro-EU centrist policy programme, which places them pretty much at the same spot on the political spectrum as the Liberal Democrats. They hope that they might be more successful in the centre ground than a party deeply damaged by its history in a coalition with the Conservatives. However, it seems that following weeks, and what feels here at TLDR like months, of Brexit drama, the British public is willing to put its faith, and more importantly their crosses, back in the boxes of the Liberal Democrats, possibly undermining the existence of Change UK. However, what you must bear in mind is this is just one election, and a local election at that. Local elections are notoriously used as a protest at government, and smaller parties are expected to do well. Since 2000, 63% of local elections have been won, measured by the highest number of councils, by the party in opposition. So even though the Conservatives have been hammered here, it doesn't necessarily mean they'll face as bad a beating at a general or even European election. So as we said at the top, both of the major parties took a thumping in these elections. You might be wondering why. Or you might have been watching the news recently and know exactly why. Either way, let me clarify what happened quickly. As I mentioned, the governing party always tends to do badly in local elections, so Labour were hoping to pick up some votes from the Conservatives. Instead, it seems that the Liberal Democrats were the ones who scooped up these votes. A lot of people are blaming this on Brexit, as has become the default position of every politician in 2019. Labour's stance on Brexit has been somewhat confusing. Many people have hoped or even expected the opposition party to stand up to the government and fight the Remainer position. Instead, they've struggled to pull together a solid strategy and certainly haven't been the voice of Remain that many wanted. Remember that while a majority of Brits voted to leave in 2016, 48% did vote to remain, meaning a sizable slice of the population aren't happy with the government's pro-Brexit strategy. Many of those people are also unhappy with Labour's Brexit policies, or lack of Brexit policies. So if they did want to vote for a party who represented their views on Brexit and show their support for remaining, voting Lib Dem was the obvious choice, as the Liberal Democrats have been strongly against Brexit since the beginning, and continue to vocally oppose it. A number of Labour MPs have criticised Labour's approach for a long time now, and that certainly hasn't stopped in reaction to the results of these elections. Labour MPs have made their voices clear on Twitter, with lots of negative tweets from MPs. Election Lesson 1. If you don't give people something to vote for, they will not vote for you. Stand in the middle of the road and you get run over in both directions. I never thought constructive ambiguity would survive the white heat of the ballot box. Voters want to know what they're getting from a party. Fudge just sickens them. It's been clear for months that Labour's Brexit fudge was melting under the public's gaze. We lost votes in every direction last night because voters do not reward equivocation. But we lost the most to the Greens and Lib Dems, being rewarded for their clarity on Brexit. In a statement issued by Labour, Corbyn responded to the losses, emphasising some of the gains that they made, saying, even at this stage of results, we've won Trafford Council and are making gains across the country, including Tory heartlands. He even tackled the issue of Brexit, saying, as well as local issues, voters have been talking to us about how the Tories' shambolic handling of Brexit is overshadowing everything else. We will continue putting our case for an alternative deal to Parliament, and we'll put that case to the European Union, because Labour does not want to divide people on how they voted in 2016. We want to bring people together. Despite Corbyn's claims, many of his own party are unhappy, and Labour officials have commented that they're unhappy and disappointed with the results. But their defeats didn't come close to the hemorrhaging of votes that the Conservatives experienced. As I explained earlier, the Conservatives were not in the greatest of positions to start with. Being in government already puts them on the back foot, as anything they do in government that hasn't been popular with the public will likely be used against them in the local elections. Additionally, as YouGov has shown, a huge 49% of people have a negative opinion on their leader Theresa May, with only 27% having a positive opinion. Turnout is generally quite low in local elections. Last time round, local election turnout was only 35%, compared to 68.8% turnout in the most recent general election in 2017, and 72.7% turnout in the EU referendum. This is likely because people often don't know who their councillors are, or what they do for them. It's not reported in quite the same way. With general elections, there's a lot of information presented on national news apps, comedy panel shows like Have I Got News For You and Mock the Week. This simply doesn't happen with local politics. So voters tend to take their advice on how to vote from national politics, even if it isn't directly relevant. That's why, even though local councils have next to nothing to do with Brexit, people likely voted against the Conservatives because of the failure of the Conservative government to deliver Brexit when they said they would. Brexit is swiftly replacing the weather and football as our favourite things to complain about, whereas local bin collection, schools and road management aren't as frequently discussed. Brexit also seems to be the key thing that May took from her party's defeat. In a speech reacting to the results, she described the results as very difficult. She went on to say that the message Labour and Conservative voters were sending was just get on and deliver Brexit. While this might be true, it doesn't help clear out what kind of Brexit people want, or heal the divide between the two sides. In regard to UKIP, they also weren't winners from the vote. Despite only having a handful of councillors nationally in the last election, these appear to have been reduced significantly. So far they've lost 62 councillors, down to only 18. Making things worse, in the last few weeks, the Brexit Party has been established by Nigel Farage, the former leader of UKIP. Despite having only minor roles in UK politics, his personality was a big driving force behind the popularity of UKIP, and has even been credited as being one of the main influences in the UK's decision to leave, something we'll be discussing in a video out next week. As Farage's new Brexit Party was only established a few weeks ago, they were unable to field candidates in time for the local elections, meaning that UKIP didn't have to fear that people may jump ship to the new party with a more famous leader. This means that, especially considering the backlash the government has experienced because they failed to withdraw from the EU on the 29th of March as promised, we would have expected UKIP to do a lot better than they actually did. Things certainly aren't looking good for them in the upcoming EU election, where the Brexit Party will begin fielding candidates. Given how badly UKIP did, it's a bit strange that both May and Corbyn have interpreted the Conservative and Labour losses to mean that voters want politicians to get on with Brexit. If this were the case, voters would have voted for pro-Brexit parties like UKIP, and not for pro-EU parties like the Lib Dems and Greens, which is actually what happened. As I've said throughout, there are still a number of results to call at the time of recording, so things are set to change. If you'd like to see a much more in-depth review when all of this is wrapped up, then drop us a like on this video and comment below to let us know. We'll also be posting updates on the result on our other social media pages, so head over to Instagram and Twitter to find out what's been happening since this video was recorded. While we're asking you to do stuff, following us on Twitter would be incredibly helpful. As we grow, we're going to want to reach out to new people on Twitter to create amazing content for you, and having a greater follow account only lends us more credibility. Also, while you're on Twitter, I recommend that you follow Election Maps UK. Their account breaks down election results and projections, and if you've enjoyed this video, I'm sure you'd like their account. We have nothing to do with them, but I just wanted to give them a shout out as they're a truly great account. Make sure to subscribe to our channel to be updated when we release videos in the future. You can also find us across other social networks and find out when we post exclusive content and articles by searching for TLDR News.